Well, thank you everybody for coming today to the Multi-Hazard Resilient Building Information Session with Natural Hazard Research Australia. My name's Rowena Morris and I'll tell you a little bit about it today, and then I've got some great presenters for you today. I'd like to acknowledge that we're meeting across a range of different Aboriginal lands today. I'd like to pay my respect to elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like us to acknowledge that these lands and waters have always been places of teaching, researching and learning. And I'm on the beautiful Dharawal lands near Wollongong at the moment. So feel free to pop into the chat where you are, and also to introduce yourself as well to everybody that's here today. What we will cover is a more detailed description of the project, and you're going to hear from the people that really care and have put together the concept originally, and also what sort of opportunity there is for the interested parties to pose specific questions to assist with developing your submissions for the current expression of interest to multi-hazard resilient building with Natural Hazard Australia. The answers to any of the questions that we'll talk about at the end will be transcribed and shared on the project page under frequently asked questions. You can ask questions at any time by raising your hand. This is a friendly chat. You don't need to be shy. Look, be vocal, ask me hard questions. I've got people here to help answer them, which is great. If not, I'll answer them for you. It will be easy flowing, not too formal, chat's open, use it as much as you like, comments, questions, etc. anytime. We should have time for a verbal question and answer towards the end of the briefing as well. The most important thing today is that you, the researchers, get to ask questions and clarify aspects from the call for expression of interest. You'll get a good understanding of what we have in mind for this project and the EOI process, so that you're in a good position to put forward a solid submission. We appreciate the time and effort that goes into responses for expression of interest, and this is your chance to get the information you need from us to support you for your application. So I'd like to introduce Rebecca Dawson. She's our Senior Manager, Natural Hazard and Climate Change Department of Planning and Infrastructure. And she'll be talking most of the time today. Then there's also Daniel Austin, the Deputy Commissioner of New South Wales State Emergency Service, and he's very passionate about this project, particularly from storms and hail. Being a frontline person, he understands the issues that occur. Phil Finnemore is kind of in the background, but he's there to give us some information from the Australian Building Codes Standard Board. Then behind the scenes, I've got Lara, who's helping out with the making of this Zoom to work for all of us. Can't do it without Lara, so I really appreciate you coming along. And then obviously all yourselves as attendees. So introduce yourself in the chat and let us know who you are and what your interests are. And it'd be lovely to just see the type of people that have come along today. For NHRA, we stand on the shoulders of the former Bushfire CRC and the Bushfire Natural Hazard CRC. It's a great organisation to be a part of. I personally was a student with the Bushfire CRC some 20 odd years ago. The centre really works well together with both the end users, the stakeholders, the researchers. It's a lovely collaborative group, which is one of the big selling points. But we are now the Natural Hazard Research Australia, and NHRA commenced in 2021. We have $85 million to spend over 10 years from the Commonwealth Government, plus partner contributions, mainly from the state, different government departments. And the core objective of the centre is to protect human life and minimise harm and suffering, contribute to developing and supporting well-prepared and resilient communities, and invest in research that translates into action. So I'm going to throw over to Rebecca, who's going to give you a little bit of a project background to multi-hazard resilient buildings.
Thanks, Rowena. And I'd just like to firstly acknowledge that I'm speaking to you from Gadigal Wongal land in the outer inner west of Sydney. And I'd like to pay my respects to elders past and present, and to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders on the call as well. Look, I'm with the Department of Planning. We are currently looking at climate risk and how to better address it in the planning system. And so the kind of background to this project is very much embedded in our work in recognising that the decisions that are being made by councils and by planning authorities about what type of development goes where, and the nature of those developments, and then the design and the materials that are used in those developments, has a big contribution to how resilient both the built environment is, but particularly the resilience of the people and the communities that live in those developments that we're approving and we're building. Um, the origin of this project comes from a space where we're really wanting to try and build well-located homes that will last into the future and that support thriving, healthy, resilient communities that are able to face the kind of future challenges that we can see coming. There's significant variation in between different jurisdictions in Australia at the moment in terms of how mitigation measures for natural hazards are included in building requirements. There's a lot of variation in the types of standards and guidance that's being provided across Australia at the moment. So one of the things around this project is to try and get a better feel for what is the range out there, what are some of the best practice type examples, to really try and get us in a better place in terms of being able to be at the forefront of providing more resilience and better adaptation for our communities. We're seeing Australian communities experience more natural hazards, obviously. Uh, um, at the moment, we're seeing a lot of natural hazards, which are causing millions of dollars of damage every year. And beyond the dollar value of the damage to the buildings and the infrastructure for the community, like schools, libraries, uh, you know recreation facilities, we're really seeing a lot of impacts on individual communities too. So there's a human cost to it. There's personal economic costs of loss of time, loss of business. And what we're seeing in the data that we're looking at is that the impact is going to increase over time. So in terms of the longer term impact, we're currently in New South Wales committed to developing and delivering almost 400,000 new homes across the state over the next few years. But we're also looking at the total economic costs of natural disasters rising. This is coming out of Treasury and the Reconstruction Authority in New South Wales. So the costs are looking to rise to between $15 and $17 billion annually in 2060 under a moderate warming scenario. And there's a really strong focus, particularly on coastal risks in that assumptions and those calculations. But we also know that things like bushfires, storms, cyclones, flooding events, flash flooding events are also going to have an effect. So for us, we're looking at how we can better design buildings to tolerate these kind of conditions, how we can embed mitigation measures to address the full range of natural hazards, particularly under the projected intensification of some of these hazard exposures due to climate change scenarios. The project's seeking to increase the resilience of buildings across Australian jurisdictions, not just New South Wales, but there is a focus on New South Wales for our work. Looking at the effects of multiple hazards, particularly compounding hazards, and looking at changing hazard scenarios over time. We're hoping to improve building outcomes, the different types of building elements incorporated, how we test for multiple hazards is a big question for us, and we're looking to generate best practice Australian-wide approach to building requirements and guidance. Talking about the project description, the project aims to review current building standards and guidance in relation to multiple hazards across Australia, with a particular focus on New South Wales. Um, we're, we're looking at how do we mitigate risks for natural hazards, including how we consider multiple hazards and compounding hazards where they build up over time. Um, what are the suitable cost-effective methods and methodology to improve building resilience against these hazards? And also potentially to respond to this changing hazard environment over time, so to kind of continue to retrofit and adapt buildings over time. What is the greater resilience? How do we build in greater resilience to multiple hazards? For example, north coast of New South Wales has, you know, had repeated flood events plus some bushfires in between. South Coast infamously had a bushfire and then a flash flooding event virtually straight afterwards. We really are seeing scenarios at the moment where we're having communities exposed to multiple hazards, and sort of thinking on a single hazard by hazard lens isn't working very well for us at the moment. We're also looking at what's the appetite and the opportunity to address these proposed changes through things like changes to the building standards, because for decision makers like councils, when they're looking at approving new developments, that's the lever that they can use to really improve building materials and building design, is through things like the building standards. So we're actually wanting to understand how these types of responses could fit inside some of the existing frameworks that we use. Project description.
Yep,
So
sure.
going on with the project description, sort of in a little bit more detail about what we're looking for. Identify the building requirements and guidelines across a range of hazards across Australia, how the building elements and systems work together and how they perform under multiple hazards, and then identify gaps and opportunities for improving this, including options to better address changing conditions over time due to climate change. We're looking at things such as bushfire, floods, coastal erosion, inundation, sea level rise, heat waves is very important, storm, landslides, cyclones, droughts, tornadoes. There's a whole range of natural hazards. We're looking at whether or not the current standards are suitable, how well they're working, and whether they should be expanded. For example, should cyclone controls be moving further south? Should bushfire controls be extended beyond the current range, considering the intensification of bushfires? We're looking at the analysis of necessary building elements that would be required to address these different hazards under different conditions, things like best practice standards, materials and designs that would be applicable, and what they are in different jurisdictions, because we've noted that this is different. How the building elements work together, and as I said, particularly for different hazards and across multi-hazards. The testing methodology used in some of these scenarios, and also some of the, some insight into some of the impacts of when the test limit is exceeded and how you might deal with that. Yeah, and so that's pretty much the project description at this stage.
With the expected outputs, what we're looking for the researchers is you write a research plan. So there'll be a research services contract as well as the research plan, and you work on that one in consultation with the stakeholders, such as Rebecca and Daniel and Phil. Part of what we're looking at for the outputs would be a literature review, at least 3 case studies. You are welcome to do more case studies, but you need to work within the envelope of the budget of the funding that we have. We're looking for a cost-benefit analysis, definitely multi-hazard building guidelines, and best practice methods. We also ask for a plain language statement at the end. It's really easy to get carried away with excellent jargon if you're an engineer, but we need the sort of words that your general layman will understand. And that's a big part. NHRA are really big on communication. We want the technical scientific stuff, but we also want everybody to be able to understand it. So we work in lots of different formats, including your good old published literature reviews, as well as your scientific journal papers. We do look for quarterly progress reports. That's done through a system called Turnkey Salesforce. We evaluate the project at the end, and we also look for lots of different sorts of communication, such as there's hazard notes and posters, and as well as webinars. Now, I'm going to throw over to Daniel because he's from SES. He'll introduce himself briefly and tell you a bit more about the outcomes that we're looking at for this project.
Afternoon, everybody. Yes, Daniel Austin from the New South Wales State Emergency Service. I know a few familiar faces online, and a few of you have probably heard me make some of these same statements today. As Rebecca pointed out, the world we're living in is changing. The disasters we're dealing with are more frequent, and certainly from a frontline responders and a community perspective, we're getting to the point where how much more is tolerable in reality. And there's a saying that's been on my whiteboard for the last 15 years that screaming sirens and flashing lights are not a sign of success. They are a sign of failure. And if you look at the number of impacts across the communities over the last few years, we not only need to build better, but we need to be able to recover better from whatever we're faced with. And a simple example has been, when we wash out a property after it's been flooded, what is left behind? Do we have to strip it all out? Can we build from things that will make it much easier to do? From our point of view, from a responding agency's point of view, it is about how do we create that better resilience, the community resilience through the housing stock and the building stock. It's also recognising that we are allegedly in a housing crisis. That's referenced every day. So we can't make things to the point that they are so expensive that people can't do things and drive people away. But we need to make a concerted effort into the future as to how we do things, and hopefully how we have to respond to less things. And we know through plenty of case studies that people won't just up and leave and move out of a location. And the growing population of Australia means we're moving into more and more places that are potentially at risk. So as I think has been said fairly well, it's about identifying those elements that we can design and change, and make sure that the housing stock, the community themselves, are safer moving forward. And much like we've done with things like AS 3959 and other things across the sector, the opportunity to come up with the rules and the regulations to help us govern that as we move forward. So that's probably it from me, Ro, in terms of what we're hoping to see,
Yeah,
the
beautiful.
longer term view out of this.
Yeah, thank you very much. I always love the flashing lights story because it's very, very true. We actually want to make it so those buildings are multi-resilient, and we don't need Daniel. He can lose his job, but no, we don't want to do that either. We just want to shift him into helping after the floods as opposed to or fires or whatever the many different hazards are, so that your house is still already standing. So engineers, please help us, and other designers. Big part of NHRA is that we like to work collaboratively. So you've got Rebecca, you've got Daniel, you've got a lot of people and a lot of knowledge that you can work with to produce the end product that we need to make more resilient homes. So the researchers are expected to undertake the research using a collaborative approach to assist in the translation and transfer of knowledge to end users, as well as to ensure the project meets their needs. Researchers are encouraged to outline your approach to ensure effective collaboration. We are open to you embedding researchers within an end user organisation for a period of time just to help you learn and understand the ways of the end users and the terminology and what's really important to them. The budget for this project is $500,000 to $750,000. When you apply for the EOI, there is a budget sheet that you need to fill in. There's a 3-year time frame expected for this project. Behind the scenes, NHRA, we have really strong governance. We like one lead provider for contracting purposes, but you can have subcontracts. The contract is with NHRA and the lead provider. Each quarterly, we have a meeting with the project management committee, and that will include people like Rebecca and Daniel and Phil, myself, as well as our comms team, as well as your researchers. And we have various milestones that we make sure we meet at those different quarterly meetings. And also it's a way of you actually working with the participant organisations to ensure we're delivering the research that's useful, usable and used. There's a project plan, which I mentioned before, that we write up with it'll have a table of milestones in there that they get discussed about at the quarterly progress meetings. There will be an evaluation of the project at the end, as well as what we really love is presentations to the stakeholders. We have great, it's the NHRA forum each year. The one coming up soon is in Adelaide, but we do like our researchers to come along and present to our stakeholders at that forum. So there's a website where you can, and I apologize, this actually has the wrong site on it. I'll fix that for the other version, but there's a website that you can download for the multi-hazard resilient buildings. The contact that you need if you're going to actually contact NHRA, you can't contact me directly, but we do ask that you contact research at naturalhazards.com.au to ask any further questions, which we'll then publish on our frequently asked question page. The EOI is due by the 7th of May, 5 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. So those in WA, please be aware we're working on Australian Eastern Standard Time. When making the submission, it's a bit like back in school where you have criteria. It's the same with this process. We list the criteria that we need. I won't read it out to you today, but you'll find this detailed information in the EOI, as well as the budget template for you to fill in. You do get assessed on all the different parts of the criteria when we're deciding which applicant we were going to award the EOI to. So please do make a clear submission. Be aware of the word limits. The document does limit you to the word limits. If you're having problems, contact our research services. It might be that you need to do a PDF or something to change it a little bit, but we do like you to stick to the word limit, and you do get penalised if you go over. We do require only 2-page CV for each of your proposed project team members. We do have a weighting for the EOI assessment on those criteria, and that's documented in the EOI submission form. I'm going to remind you of the dates. So we're here today on the 14th of April, but it's the 7th of May when the EOI is due. So don't try and hand it in late because you just get ruled out the way in HRO. We're pretty strict with our EOI rules, so you need to make sure you get that EOI in time and on the correct day, because we know it's a lot of work. We appreciate the work that you put into actually writing the submission. We get the pleasure of reviewing them all and making sure it's all good. So really looking forward to seeing what your submissions have to say. I want to actually thank my presenters that came today, Daniel, Rebecca, and Phil behind the scenes. I would open it up now for questions, but before I do that, I want to make sure you remember, if you have further questions at the end of today, you go to the research@naturalhazards.com.au to put anything in writing. For asking questions, you're welcome to put your hand up and Lara will have a look along to make sure I don't miss anyone. There is a question from Danielle about how work plans could incorporate into this project. I guess have a look at our EOI for more information, as well as our website, and then get involved as we go. Either be one of the research that is part of the project, or you can come to our forum and find out more as we develop the project as well. Kerry, which standards and requirements do you want this project to cover? Building requirements, planning requirements, Australian standards? I might throw to Phil for this question because he is from the Australian Building Code.
Okay, I'll answer this as best I can by setting out the context of what building regulations and building standards actually means. Nationally, the National Construction Code is the document that is picked up by state and territory jurisdictions through their parliamentary legislation. So the building code of itself is just a book. Reference documents, that is reference standards that are called up by the National Construction Code, which are not always Australian standards. They can be other standards. There's an array of different types of reference documents. Anything that's called up in the NCC, which is called up by a state and territory parliamentary act, is the building requirements for that jurisdiction. That's those that are relevant to the NCC. Each state and territory may have separate regulations for buildings in their own regulatory framework, but the National Construction Code, I guess, is the umbrella document called up by those jurisdictions. Standards, Australian standards and other standards, as I just said, are reference documents called up under or within the National Construction Code. It would not be possible to answer, for me anyway, without looking it up, each relevant reference document or standard that relates to something responding to a natural hazard, be it bushfire, cyclones in terms of wind loading. They're all set out in, I think, off the top of my head, Schedule 2, Schedule 1 or 2, don't quote me on that, of the NCC for the referenced documents. So they're the standards. The building code is the umbrella document called up by states and territories. Now we say building standards. The minimum requirements of the NCC and the performance requirements, which are the minimum requirements, is what's required to be met for the construction of any building in Australia, notwithstanding any other relevant regulations that a state and territory jurisdiction may have separate to that. I hope that's answered it, Rowena. I'm happy to clarify that if I haven't already confused everyone.
And I might just sort of add to that. I think you've well kind of pointed in that direction. The building standards and the National Construction Code are that kind of benchmark, and that is quite almost universal as a standard. But each state may have additional things in their planning system, and that's where planning regulations would come along. And I would just flag that could look like building standards at a state level, like they could have through the planning system, say a regulation or a state policy that introduces other building standards at that level. But that could actually go right down to a local council level as well. In New South Wales, we have things called development control plans that councils may put in other references. And so an example of that, I think, is in the flooding space, where bits of it sit in Australian standards, bits of it sit in the higher national standards, but some of the councils actually also have their own sets of guidance, or different states might have their own sets of guidance, particularly around the stuff that Daniel was touching on before in terms of being able to come back in, clear out a building post flood, and then and re-implement a functional building space. So some of that stuff may be sitting inside state planning controls or local planning controls. So I think it's probably worth thinking about the broader sense if we're wanting to look at best practice examples, because best practice won't necessarily all be captured in the building standards and the National Construction Code.
Cool. Thank you, Rebecca.
Sounds to me like it's all Australian standards that have got a building relevance that are called up in either planning or building code. You know, some sort of standard. It's not just the sort of general requirements that a local council might put on something.
Yeah, I don't know that has to be an Australian standard. I mean, Ro, what's your feeling? I mean, my thought was that if it's best practice, we probably, if there's something out there that's innovative, we probably want to know about it.
Go for your best practice, and then if we can get it into the standards, we will. Now, I've got a really important question, and I have fixed the slide up now. So I've just shared it with you. The budget is 700,000 to 900,000. There was a typo in the slide for that section. So just sharing, making sure you've registered now. We've just upped the money for the project, which is great. $700,000 to $900,000. Apologise for that one. That would be one of those cut and paste between different presentations. This project we value. That's why it got so much more money. We actually think it's a really important project that's going to help our end users big time. That's why they've put it forward. So yeah, please do work within the project budget of 700 to 900,000 as per what's written in the EOI. Would you please expand on project outcomes versus outputs in the EOI? Okay, so there's a thing called a program logic, and also something called a theory of change. And it's where we come up with our big problems and we work through a process of, well, what are the activities we need from a research point of view? What is it that we think we need to research? Then the activities are kind of like your surveys, or your actual, like where you go out and have a look at the buildings, or your literature reviews. And then your outputs is the material that the research is generating, like your literature review, your final report. The outcomes, that's where we're starting to go, well, what is the difference we're making on the ground? Is it that we're going to make it so those buildings are able to cope with 3 different hazards? Can we get that into the Australian standards? So from the researchers, you primarily are delivering the outputs of the project as opposed to the outcomes. The outcomes are where your end users come into play, and they really start helping make it happen by linking it into the right legislation or into the right standards. So there's a lot on the website you can look up, but the magic word I'd say is go look up program logics. We then also go a next step further, which is the impacts. And that's actually saying that we're going to, for example, on this project, end up with having a safer community that's more resilient and able to cope after there's been a natural hazard in their area. So it's a good question about what is outcome outputs. Let me know if you need more information. Just do a screen dance or put your hand up. That would be lovely. Now I've got Anthony asking a question. The question, Rebecca, she mentioned a range of hazards. Do we need to address all of them using the standard planning guidelines in the EOI, or can it be some of them? Yes, it can be some of them. And what it will be in the end is when we meet as a project management committee, the group is going to decide which hazards. So your EOI won't be what decides the hazards. Please do tell us your speciality, but it will be as a participant group together that we decide, these are the core hazards that this group would like to address. I hope that answers your question, Anthony. Tartha, is there a limit on maximum number of participants? We understand that the contribution of each participant must be justified. Are you meaning research participant or our end user participants on that one, Tartha? Researchers, you can have as many as you like.
Yeah,
yep, researchers, you can have as many people as you like, but you've only got that bucket of money between $700,000 and $900,000 to work with. So it is a very open project, but I think we're going to get some really exciting solutions coming from it.
There's a
Yep.
question just popped into the chat.
Why
Focus on New South Wales?
You go, Rebecca.
I think because we asked the question. Actually, as I sort of said up front, this is the space that we're working in at the moment. We can see what's already in the National Construction Code that comes through our system and kind of comes through our development and planning process. But we're looking at in conjunction with the SES, how can we make this better? How can we kind of future proof and get better outcomes? So it just happened to be that it was, it's an area we're working in. We're really passionate about it. So we were kind of reaching out to see, is there any way to get some research done to help support us in actually doing better through our planning and development systems so that we can support people like Daniel in their efforts to make communities more resilient in New South Wales.
Thank you, Rebecca. And Priya, we're a Natural Hazard Research Australia. We're a national organisation. So yes, we are focusing on New South Wales, but we like our research to end up being nationwide, and it will be. So what we do in New South Wales, we can then apply to other states. There's also possibly a stage 2 or 3 of this project where we can start looking at, okay, we found this out in 3 years. What else can we then apply into other states? So no, I don't think it'll only be New South Wales. It's just we've only got that funding at the moment, but later, hopefully we get some more funding as we start improving our multi-hazard building research that we can do. Are there any professional peak bodies involved in this project at this stage, or is it desirable? Short answer to that, I don't know exactly, apart from the government agencies and the Australian Codes Board. So we do work with all sorts of end users though. So I do assume there will be some peak bodies getting involved, but they won't be part of the project management committee. They'll be part of the wider community contributing towards the research. So AII, PIA, and master builders at this stage aren't included, but we would hope that they would engage and give us some advice and be interested in the project. And it would be great to hear what sort of stakeholders the people think, particularly on this line, as well as our end users, think that should be part of this project. Part of the research plan that you write up does have a communications section in it, and that's where you'd start bringing in your peak bodies as to who might be interested in your outcomes and your findings. New South Wales SES is acting as a conduit for other SES agencies across the country. That's just a message that Daniel wrote in relation to that question. Sherman, will collaboration team across different universities be considered for the project? 100%. We do love a consortium. You are welcome to. We prefer the contract to go to one of the universities and then you subcontract the other universities. And you can put all that sort of detail into your budget proposal. Danielle, is Bureau of Meteorology, CSIRO, or Australian Climate Service involved in any way from the climate hazard perspective? Not at this stage, but they are heavily involved in Natural Hazard Research Australia, and we work collaboratively with all our different projects. So you'll find they end up being involved, but not at the initial research plan development stage. Scrolling for any more hands up to see if there's any more questions. If you've got further questions, please do send it to the research email address that's in on the EOI. I thank everyone for their time today, and I really look forward to your applications. Rebecca's just popped in that DPHI has links with Planning Institute of Australia and other planning departments across Australia. Jane Sexton has asked, is there an AFAC working group comms that will be shared? We do working closely with AFAC, so yes, we will be finding the appropriate group. We have a big utilisation session with AFAC as well, where we talk about different projects. So we will be working in with AFAC as well. Mitu, is it possible to have a discussion with you before submitting an EOI? No, sorry. It's today's your chance to have a discussion. So keep talking if you've got more questions. If not, it'll be in the written format. We are very careful with our probity. So we like to make sure that everyone's on the same playing field. We don't just talk to one person who wants to submit and give them extra information than if there's somebody else. So that's why it all becomes a written question and answer from here onwards. Okay, now I think this is about the 4th time I've said, is there any more? Yes, there was a hand up then. I saw someone.
No, mine's hands up.
David, yes, great. Thanks.
Just a timing question. With pretty much most of Australia going on leave between Easter and Anzac Day, everyone's going to lose a week to this. So if we are looking at a large I was going to say conglomerate.
Consortium, yep.
Consortium, that might be a better word. And with most people of different areas all being on leave over that week, Is there any thought of actually extending the deadline by a week to make up for the massive amount of public holidays?
I would 100% support you on that. It will depend on my managers higher up. They
Could
really want to
you
get these
take that
projects
one
out there.
further up?
So I will take that on notice and we will make sure we get back to everybody. It would be great if you put that question to Research Services at NHRA, the email address that we gave you, because that way, yeah, we can push it up the food chain. But yes, I think that's a very fair statement when you've got Anzac Day and Easter and everything else rolled into it. I'm assuming you're only asking for a week, or would you want more than a week if you are looking at a big consortium?
Well, you know me, I'll take as whatever I can get, but no, just a week. Because everyone here is going to be on leave. All the people we're talking with, they're all on leave between Easter to, you know, we're all going to lose that chunk of time. And I assume a lot of people online as well.
Yeah, fully understand. Look, I'll have a chat to our managers and hopefully we can add an extra week, but no confirmation until you get it in
Of
writing
course,
in the email.
of course. No, thank you for that, Ryan.
Great, no problem. Someone else saying a bit more time, extending the deadline. Yep, we will definitely look into that one. It's good to get your feedback on that today, everybody. Okay, thank you everybody for coming today, and please do put your questions through to our email address.